In the near future, a race of humongous insect-like aliens, known as the Uchu Kaiju, are discovered traveling across the galaxy. They, for a mysterious reason, want to cause the extinction of the human race. Humanity responds by developing space battleships and giant combat mechs to fight back against this strange galactic menace. 6 years after the first contact with the aliens, a young girl named Noriko Takaya attends a military school in hopes of going into space along with her father, who was an admiral in a space fleet. While she is the daughter of a famous admiral, her own piloting skills are quite lackluster to say the least. However, it all changes when she was selected along with the skilled pilot Kazumi Amano and their mentor Coach Oda to go into space on a massive spacecraft known as the Exilion to pilot a powerful new machine known as the Gunbuster to fight back against the alien race. Throughout the OVA, Noriko trains under Coach Oda to become a skillful pilot, while at the same time witness the true horrors of space battles, as well as deal with the time distortion effect caused by advancing out in space. Gunbuster is a 6-episode OVA and one of the first anime series that Gainax ever created. Seeing as how the people who worked on Gunbuster were otakus who grew up watching shows like Getorobo, Gundam, Ideon, etc., it makes sense that Gunbuster follows under a very similar premise as those shows. Sure, the themes of work hard and achieve glorious things, as well as the concept of aliens coming to destroy mankind, has already been done to death in other works of fiction. Though I feel Gunbuster does a very great job in presenting this in its own way, mostly thanks to the story progression as well as the development of the core characters. Noriko dreams of making her father proud by becoming a space pilot, yet she lacks confidence in herself at first and doesn't really possess the piloting skills. So throughout the OVA, and this would become rather common in Gainax shows, we do see Noriko go from a rather angsty, whiny, terrified girl that acts more on the lines of a child to becoming one hell of a badass pilot, mostly thanks to the encouragement from her mentor Ota. And throughout the OVA, we do see Noriko, and to a lesser extent Kazumi, develop as well-rounded characters and come full circle. However, this leads to the biggest problem that I have with this show: the lack of development for the other characters. Now, mind you, Gunbuster is only 6 episodes long. 6 episodes is not enough time to develop everybody in the show, which is pretty sad, because I actually find some of these characters interesting, but for the most part, they just take a backseat in favor of pushing Noriko's character further. Now granted, Kazumi does have some character development, as I said earlier, and to an extent Ota does as well, but aside from those core 3, none of the secondary cast is explored that much. Like Jung Frood, the proto-Oscalanji Soryu of the series. She was interesting enough in her debut episode, but she, for the most part, has very little impact on the main story itself. This is what happens when you don't have enough time. As for the aliens, well, they're pretty one-dimensional for the most part, but the story does call for them to be one-dimensional, so I'm fine with that. Now, Gunbuster also was one of the first anime series to introduce this phenomenon known as space-time distortion, in which the farther you go in space, the faster time moves on Earth. Now, I'm not going to spoil much about it because it's actually a very important element in the show, but I will say it's actually quite fascinating. I will say this series has a lot of really good, very genuine, very emotionally driven moments that I really, really love. And you know a series is good when it can make you feel certain emotions. At least that's how it is to me. And I really love the ending. It is one of the most tear-jerking, most genuine, most emotionally thrilling moments I've ever seen in anime, and it almost made me cry. Yeah, a show about girls in very revealing clothing operating giant robots to beat the shit out of evil space aliens almost made me cry. It is that damn good. So all in all, while the series does start off as sort of a parody of super robot shows, it quickly turns into something much, much more. For an OVA released in 1988, the art and animation is very, very good, and it holds up very well. While it does feel kind of choppy in some areas, it does get better later on. The battles are extremely explosive and a spectacle to watch. You can tell that Gainax put their heart and soul into animating these fights, particularly the famous one in episode 5, which is hands down one of the best super robot battles I've ever seen in a mecha anime. The Gunbuster itself is pretty badass and does some honestly very, very impressive things for a super robot, despite having elements borrowed from other super robots, as well as being mixed in with a bit of Kamen Rider. Though despite those borrowed elements, I do definitely feel that the Gunbuster stands out on its own right as a mech. And then... I need to talk about this. Yes, this anime is also infamous for being one of the first anime series to introduce fan service. Now, you know when you have that one show, usually a harem or a rom-com, where the females tend to have giant-ass boobs that tend to bounce as much as frickin' basketballs? Yeah, Gunbuster pretty much started that whole shebang bang. And I don't really mind it that much since it was one of the first anime to establish that sort of thing. But even still, I felt it was a little bit distracting, but it is what it is, you know. But overall, I really do feel that the visuals in Gunbuster really did stand the test of time. When it comes to musical scores, I found Gunbuster's musical score to be very good, though there are two songs that I like to mention here. The first is the opening theme, Active Heart by Noriko Sakai, which is a very upbeat, very lighthearted, and it's full of enthusiasm. I like it quite a bit, and it's probably one of the most underrated anime songs I ever listened to. And then there is, of course, the famous insert song in episode 5, Top Roll Narai Fly High, which is a more dramatic and action-oriented theme, and it really gets her blood pumping. It's one of my personal favorite songs in all of anime. The seiyus, I feel, do an outstanding job portraying the emotions of each of the characters. Noriko is voiced by Noriko Hidaka. Wait a minute. Noriko Takaya, Noriko Sakai, and now Noriko Hidaka. How many people involved in this anime are named Noriko? But anyway, you may know her as the voice of Nier from Death Note, as well as Kikyo from Inuyasha. Ota is voiced by Norio Wakamoto, who is a pretty notable seiyuu veteran in his own right. He voiced Cell from Dragon Ball Z, Vicious from Cowboy Bebop, and Bison from Street Fighter, and Dracula from Castlevania. The others I really don't know much about, but they do a good job as well. Well, what do you know? Gunbuster is a superb super robot show. While it has similar themes from other mecha series, it does stand out on its own right as a mecha anime. But I can't excuse the lack of development for the other characters. Had this anime gone longer, it could have been better, but it is what it is. It's still a very interesting story that can also be seen as an emotional thrill ride. The action is awesome and explosive, and it ends on a pretty lighthearted note. For Gainax's first true anime production, it's really something to behold. It may not be perfect, but it definitely has the spirit and the action that is also bizarre and over the top, which is what Gainax is practically all about. Final score, 8.5 out of 10.